The morning air was crisp at the Hollowbrook Police Station, a small but proud facility on the outskirts of a bustling city. The officers here were known for their dedication, their unwavering commitment to serve and protect, even when faced with personal struggles. Among them was Officer Franklin Miller, a man who had spent over 2 decades on the force, a true embodiment of what it meant to wear the badge. But recently, Franklin had been battling something far more insidious than the dangers of the job: racism. It wasn't the first time a police officer had faced such prejudice, but Franklin's case was different. The media had picked up on the story, and the outpouring of hate had been overwhelming. Franklin had become the target of vile accusations and online attacks, with some questioning his loyalty, integrity, and very worth as an officer. The silence of the station was shattered one day by the sound of engines. The rumble of a motorcade echoed in the distance, a sound that carried both power and purpose. As the sleek black cars came to a halt outside, the officers inside stood frozen, unsure of what was happening. Then, the doors swung open, and out stepped none other than President Donald Trump. Trump had come with a clear mission, though it wasn't one the media had been expecting. His motorcade didn't carry cameras or reporters. This was personal. Inside the station, Franklin sat alone in his office, his head buried in his hands. He hadn't expected this. No one had. The room seemed to grow smaller as Trump walked through the door, his presence larger than life. "Franklin," Trump said, offering a firm handshake, "I've been following your story, and I've come to tell you something. America stands with you. You are not forgotten." Franklin's eyes widened. He hadn't expected such a statement, especially not from the man who had been the target of so much political debate. But as he looked into Trump's eyes, he saw sincerity, a true acknowledgement of the struggles Franklin had faced. "You've been through a lot," Trump continued, "but this country needs to know that we stand with our heroes, no matter what." Trump walked around the station, his steps echoing in the quiet halls. He stopped to speak with the officers, one by one, each of them touched by his words. But it was Franklin who stood at the center of it all. He was no longer just a man struggling against an unjust world. Now he was seen, truly seen, by the highest authority in the land. In one of the break rooms, a photograph caught Trump's eye. It was a black-and-white image of a young officer, Franklin, in the early days of his career. He was smiling, full of hope, a symbol of all the good that police officers could do. "You've been a hero long before this," Trump said, his voice low but strong, "and you'll continue to be." Later that afternoon, Trump met with the press, his voice cutting through the noise of political chatter. "This man," he said, pointing to Franklin, "has served this country with honor. He deserves to be recognized, not for the color of his skin, but for the courage in his heart. America remembers its heroes." As Franklin stood by, his heart swelling with pride, he knew that, at that moment, he wasn't just defending his own honor. He was defending the very essence of justice, and the country that would now stand behind him. The noise of the world, the hatred and racism, no longer had the power to define him. Trump smiled, offering a final word to the officers. "We'll make sure you get the support you deserve. This isn't just about one officer. It's about all of you." And with that, the day was marked not by the hatred of the past, but by the unshakable recognition of the sacrifices made by the men and women in blue, an acknowledgement that had been long overdue. Trump's words echoed in the Hollowbrook Police Station long after he left, lingering in the air like a promise made to every officer within those walls. Franklin Miller stood tall, his back straighter than it had been in weeks. The weight of the accusations and hate that had once weighed heavily on him began to lift, replaced by something far more powerful: pride. The next few days were a blur. News stations covered the event, and the headlines were full of praise. President Trump stands up for Officer Miller, read one. Racism defeated as President recognizes true heroism in police force, read another. Across the country, messages of support flooded in for Franklin. Fellow officers, former colleagues, and even citizens who had never met him sent their thanks and encouragement. Franklin had become a symbol, not of division, but of unity in the face of adversity. But it wasn't just the public recognition that had changed. Inside the Hollowbrook Police Station, a shift began. The officers who had once avoided him or kept their distance now approached Franklin with new respect. They had always known him as a dedicated officer, but now they saw him as a man who had weathered a storm and come out stronger on the other side. There was a new camaraderie in the air, one that hadn't existed before. A few weeks later, Franklin was invited to a ceremony at the White House. He had been hesitant at first, unsure if the spotlight would be too much. But as he stood beside the president again, he realized this wasn't about him. It was about something bigger. It was about showing the world that integrity, courage, and justice were what truly mattered, no matter who you were or where you came from. Officer Franklin Miller, the announcer's voice rang out as Franklin walked up to the podium. For your bravery, your dedication to the community, and your unwavering commitment to justice, we honor you today. Franklin stood in front of the podium, feeling the weight of the room's attention. The crowd of officers, dignitaries, and families stood in silent respect. He could see his own fellow officers there, proud smiles on their faces. And then, as he took a deep breath, Franklin spoke. I never did this job for the recognition, he began, his voice steady. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I've seen the worst in people, but I've also seen the best. I've seen my fellow officers stand tall in the face of danger, protect the helpless, and fight for what's right. And in all the years I've served, I've never once forgotten that I'm not alone in this fight. We are all part of something greater than ourselves. As he finished, Franklin caught sight of the president standing at the edge of the stage, his approval evident in his eyes. The room erupted in applause, but Franklin didn't feel like the hero in this moment. He was part of a team of men and women who had spent their lives protecting others. And together, they were all heroes. When Franklin left the White House that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had received the recognition he deserved, but more importantly, he had helped others see that standing up for what was right, no matter the cost, was the most important thing a person could do. And as for the hate he had endured, it no longer held the power to define him. As the sun began to set on that remarkable day, Franklin returned to Hollowbrook, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The officers at the station greeted him with cheers, but it wasn't just about the ceremony. It was about the bond they now shared, the understanding that they stood together, no matter the challenges they faced. And so, Franklin Miller continued to serve, not just as a police officer, but as a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of those who choose to protect and serve. And as he looked around at his fellow officers, he knew that, together, they would always stand strong, against the forces of hate, against the challenges of the world, and for the people who needed them most. The legacy of a hero, after all, isn't built in a moment of recognition. It's built every single day, with every act of courage, and every life touched by the work they do. Franklin's journey didn't end with that award or the recognition. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where his purpose wasn't just about wearing a badge, it was about making a lasting impact on the world, changing lives, and, most importantly, inspiring others to stand up for what was right, no matter the personal cost. Weeks later, As Franklin walked through the station one quiet evening, he passed a young rookie, Officer Ben Thompson. The rookie was nervously pacing, his face filled with doubt. Franklin paused, remembering his own first days. The same fear, the same uncertainty. He walked over and placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. "You all right, kid?" Franklin asked, his voice low but warm. Ben hesitated, then spoke, his voice shaky. "I don't know, Frank. There's a lot of talk around here. People keep saying, with everything going on in the world, I don't know if I'm ready for the hate, for the division. I don't know if I can handle it." Franklin smiled gently, knowing that Ben was asking more than just about the job. He was asking about something deeper, the weight of the badge, the weight of duty, the weight of being a public servant in a world that felt divided and uncertain. Franklin could feel the same knot tightening in his chest that he had felt years ago. "You don't have to handle it alone," Franklin replied, his voice steady. "None of us do. We're a family here, and no matter what, we've got each other's backs. But above all, remember why you're here. Not for the recognition, not for the title. You're here because you want to make a difference. And that difference, however small it may seem at times, is enough." Franklin's words lingered in the air as Ben nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing. He wasn't alone. He would never be alone in this. As Franklin turned to leave, a thought crossed his mind. How many more officers, veterans, or everyday people had ever doubted their worth, feeling overshadowed by the noise of the world? How many had faced darkness, only to find the light of hope just beyond their reach? Franklin knew that it wasn't about waiting for someone else to make the world better. It was about each individual taking the first step, no matter how uncertain or difficult that step may be. And then he remembered something President Trump had told him months ago. America needs heroes, Franklin, not just in times of crisis, but in everyday moments. The people who make the world a better place don't do it for applause. They do it because it's the right thing to do. Franklin's gaze swept across the station, and he realized just how much that had shaped him. He wasn't alone. Neither was Ben. Neither were any of the officers here. He thought about how much of life is spent on moments we may never see the result of. How many times people keep their heads down, pushing through the struggle, hoping that someday someone will notice. But so many of those acts of kindness, those moments of courage, go unnoticed, unsung. Yet, in each quiet act, there's a ripple effect. It's like throwing a pebble into a pond. Sometimes you never see the full circle, but it's always there. The good we do doesn't end with us. Franklin knew that each officer here was fighting their own battles. Some had family issues. Some were struggling with their own personal demons, but they had one thing in common: their duty, to serve, to protect, to make a difference. It didn't matter what others thought. They all had a job to do. They were standing tall in a world that sometimes seemed to have forgotten the importance of integrity, sacrifice, and community. And that's when it hit him. Maybe the most important thing wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about waiting for a hero's welcome or a grand gesture. It was about continuing to show up every day, even when the world feels like it's not watching, even when it feels like everything you do gets drowned out by the noise of the world. And then he remembered something President Trump had said. America needs heroes, Franklin, not just in times of crisis, but in everyday moments. The people who make the world a better place don't do it for applause. They do it because it's the right thing to do. That was the true heroism. Doing the right thing even when no one else was around to see it. It wasn't the speeches, the awards, or the applause that mattered. It was the quiet moments of strength, the choices made behind closed doors, the courage to stand firm in your beliefs. So what about you? When was the last time you stood up for something you believed in, regardless of the cost? When was the last time you did the right thing? Not because someone was watching, but because it was what your heart told you to do. Maybe we've all been waiting for that perfect moment to make a difference. But sometimes, the difference is made in the small acts, the ones we think don't matter. Franklin showed us that heroism can be a quiet, everyday thing. It's not always in grand gestures. It's in the simple, unwavering commitment to be the best version of ourselves. What's stopping you from being that hero? You don't need a badge to make a difference. Sometimes, it's the smallest actions that create the biggest change. Will you take that step today? Will you make your own ripple in the world? We'd love to hear your story. Have you ever faced adversity and come out stronger? Have you ever been a silent hero, even when no one was watching? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. You never know. The courage you show may just inspire someone else to take their own first step. Because together, we can create a world where every small act of kindness, courage, and integrity has the power to change everything. And when we all stand together, no matter the obstacles, no matter the challenges, that's when the true strength of a nation shines.